shadow person experiences. A man in the wall speaks to a child, haunting him. I just wanted to share a series of experiences that my son had when he was 4 years old. My son never had an issue going to bed. He was one of those rare kids who would simply stand up, look at you, and say that he was tired and ready to sleep. Then there was a 3-day stretch where he flat out refused to go to his bed. On the third night of finding him in our bed, I decided to put him in his own bed. In doing so, I woke him up, and in a half-sleep, he began to tell me about the man in the wall. He said he couldn't sleep in his room because the man in the wall kept talking to him, and he, the ghost, was loud. I asked who the man in the wall was, and my son said he had no name because he was too old. I asked what the man looked like, and my son replied, "He looks like lots of bees, and he sounds like them too." Thinking that my son was still asleep and dream talking, I laid him down, tucked him in, and went to bed with no further issues. An angry ghost. The next night was a repeat. Once again, he had snuck into our room, but I managed to catch him as he was still awake. I asked what was wrong with his bed, and he replied, "Man in the wall again." As he was fully awake, I was a little shocked. Some kids make up little stories in their heads, but my son was never one to do anything like that. So I engaged him in conversation. He said the man was angry, and I asked why. He told me that it was because he wasn't supposed to tell me about the man. I asked if the man was scary, and he said, yes. It was about this point that I broke out in gooseflesh. I'm doing it again right now. Not being able to fully grasp the situation, I picked up my son and marched into his room so he could show me where the man was. My son pointed above his headboard. Together, we told the man in the wall to go away. We told him he wasn't welcome here. My crying 4-year-old son bravely repeating every word I said. I'll admit that, at this point, it was as much for my comfort as his. After maybe 30 seconds of us shouting at the wall, like a couple of loons, my son calmly said, "He's gone. I want to go to bed now." The night to end all nights. For nearly 2 weeks, everything was calm. We went on with our lives as usual, without any issues. The bedtime routine was bad to normal, and I had all but forgotten about the man in the wall until the night to end all nights. After tucking my son in, I went to the kitchen to clean up before my wife got home. Needing a dishcloth, I walked to the linen closet in the hallway next to my son's room, and I could hear his whispering, so I placed my ear to the door. He was talking quietly. Being able to hear only one half of the conversation, I had difficulty grasping the context at first. But then, it became clear to me that I was listening to my son explain to the man in the wall that he couldn't come in. This went on for several minutes, and it was like something or someone was trying to outsmart him. I'll need to paraphrase, but the conversation went like this. "I can't." My dad said no. "No, it's too high. The window is too small. You can't come here. My dad will be mad. You're going to hurt me, I know. Ask my dad." "Why?" "Can I ask my dad? I don't like you when you get mad." At this point, I went in. My son turned to me, his bottom lip shaking, and said, "The man in the wall keeps hitting my window. He wants to come in." I then told my son to tell him to go away, and once again, my son sat in my arms as we yelled at both nothing and everything at once, my pulse pounding as I stared at the newly cracked upper window pane. Epilogue. A few years later, I looked out the front window and saw this old fellow standing at the base of the driveway looking up at my house. He stood there for several minutes, smoking a cigarette and just staring. Curious, I grabbed my coat and went out to see if everything was okay. The old fellow assured me that all was well and told me he wanted to see the house one last time before he moved into a nursing home. He told me that he was second owner of the home, having purchased it from the family of the original builder. We spoke a while on the house, and I answered many of his questions regarding things like flooring and wood trim. At some point, one invited him in for a coffee, but he declined. Then he asked me if I knew the history of the home, which I did not. He appeared taken aback by this statement for a few seconds before starting his story. Murderers, crooks, and rapists were killed in that house by other murderers, crooks, and rapists, he started. That house was built by the Purple Gang from timbers stolen on Belle Isle, a nearby community, and used as a safe house. Check out the timbers in the basement, and you will see that none of the wood matches. So I did. He was correct. There are at least 4 types of wood in the floor trusses alone. You can poke around the attic, okay, but if I were you, I would avoid the bricked-up cellar that's hidden under the northeast part of the house, right under my son's bed. You'd think I'm crazy if I told you why, but there's nothing good to see or do under there, so you're best to leave it alone. With that, he left. The Hat Man. The Hat Man found Rochelle and never left. When I was a child, I always had extremely vivid nightmares in color and detail. When I was around 12, my parents moved my bedroom to the basement. Immediately, I began to have nightmares, and they were about the other bedroom in the basement. There were monstrous creatures in there, so horrifying and impossible for my young imagination to have come up with things I had never seen before. When I had a nightmare, I would have to run past that room, up the stairs, and to the couch. It felt like something was chasing me every time, and it only got worse until, as a young adult, I refused to sleep in my room downstairs. I slept on the couch upstairs every night. I always thought there were spirits and things even more malevolent than that. Fast forward to a year and a half ago. My daughter went over to my mom's house to clean one day. She was alone in the house, and she told me she saw something in the kitchen. Knowing that she knew how I felt about the house, I just dismissed it to her imagination and fears. I didn't even ask her to describe what she saw. A few months later, we lost our house and had to move into my mom's home for 4 months. My parents moved in with my sister, so we could have the house to ourselves. After losing my house, I then lost my vehicle, believe it or not. That hurt me worse than losing the house. I cried for 2 weeks straight. It truly was the worst time in my life. And it was then that I saw him. The Shadow Man encounter. I was walking out to the deck in the backyard. You have to open a door that leads to basement stairs, then another door that leads to the garage and to the deck. I opened the first door and initially saw him out of the corner of my eye. So I turned to look at him straight on, and he did not disappear. The shadowed man just continued to walk slowly up the stairs with his head down like he was watching where he was stepping. I believe he was hiding his eyes. I couldn't believe what I saw, and out of fear, I opened up the next door and stepped out into the garage. I shut the door, and as I looked in the window on the top of the door, I watched his dark form walk past the window, his shadow blocking out my reflection. I had a bright shirt on, making it very easy to see my reflection. But I couldn't see any of my reflection when he walked past the door and into the wall to the backyard where I was heading. I saw him in detail, from the torso up. I don't remember seeing his legs for some reason. He wore a brimmed hat, a long trench coat, and he hid face. When I got to the deck, I sat down and looked over at the screen door. There, etched out of the screen, was a perfect outline of his hat. Now I know my mom's boxers scratched the bottom part of it, but there is no way they could have made the top part of the hat. I then remembered my daughter telling me that she had seen something too. So when she got home from school, I asked her to describe what she saw without telling her what I saw, and she described the exact same being. I then knew it was time to find out what this thing was, so I Googled what I saw. Black shadow man wearing wide brimmed hat and long trench coat. and up popped his picture. The hairs on me, everywhere, stood on end. Another Hat Man sighting. I did see him one other time while staying at Mom's. It was dusk, just dark enough to create a shadow. I was sitting in the car in the driveway when I saw a tall shadow on the side of the house. I assumed, at first, someone was walking by, but then realized that a person could not have made such a tall shadow. So I jumped out of the car to see if anyone else was around, but nobody was there. And this is at the very end of a cul-de-sac. I believe the Hat Man is trying to make life so stressful that I either lose my faith, go insane, or both. And from all the research I have done, no one claims to know how to get rid of him. I can't take much more. I'm tough, but everyone has their breaking point. I included the pic of the hat on the screen door. Since the first sighting, I have done hours upon hours of research. Everything that I learned was reiterated by a credible medium. I believe he, the Hat Man, has been with me off and on since I was a child, feeding off my negative emotions. I also believe he has caused much of the bad luck and health issues I've had in the last 4 years. The misfortune seems to be getting worse, along with my health. A few months ago, my 16-year-old daughter and her boyfriend were home alone at night for a few hours. They were watching Netflix in her room upstairs when they both suddenly heard loud footsteps walk up the stairs and into the hallway. Her boyfriend grabbed a baseball bat and went looking for an intruder. No one was in the house. I believe, contrary to some beliefs, that spirits can indeed follow you. We are living only 6-7 blocks away from my mom's house. A week ago, prior to this writing, my daughter had to house and dog sit for my mom. So she offered to stay with her, and they both had dreams that were similar, being chased by 3 human-like animals. 2 of the 3 were the same animals in both of their dreams. For yourself, and for others whose stories you may never fully understand, until now, download Whisper's Guide, angelsghosts.com. Not all visitors from the other side come to scare. Like this video if you believe. Subscribe for more true stories. And tell us your experience in the comments.